Hey everyone, welcome to our program, The Quick Draw. I'm your host, Mike at Owner Young Guns. With me are my co-hosts, John at Kemedi Hirioku. I said that right, John? And filling in
Close
for Dee
enough.
tonight is the very lovely and kind of quasi-famous Kelly from at Redacted. She doesn't like it when we talk about her Twitter. So we have a very exciting topic for you guys today. I'm really excited about it. I love guns, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm kind of bummed we don't have our guest tonight. She did have a bit of a family emergency, but we will have her back on, and we will talk about guns then, or something else really cool. But tonight we're going to talk about guns, gun control, gun rights, and it's going to be a topic that everybody loves. Except the people that don't like guns, but who cares about them? So, Kelly, you want to fill us in a little bit about, we mentioned, you actually read some interesting things about DC v. Heller. You said there were some things you wanted that you thought were kind of interesting that people should know about. You want to run those by us real quick?
Yeah, I did. Okay, so I thought that we should talk about it because of our guest, Bella, who's a lawyer, and so I figured she'd want us to cover this a little bit. So for those of you that don't know, basically what happened is in 1976, the city of Washington passed a firearms protection, or what was it called? They passed an act that basically was like prohibition for gun owners, prevented anybody other than police officers and security guards from owning a firearm. And if you did own a firearm, there was a bunch of regulations on what it had in your home. There was a bunch of regulations, like it had to be dismantled and or be fitted with a trigger lock. And and that was to basically curb gun violence. Well, in 2008, this police officer, his name was Dick Heller, applied to the state, applied to DC to own a handgun, and he was denied. So he sued the state, or it's not the state, it's what's the word I'm looking for? The district. He sued the district, and it was dismissed. And then, so he took it to the Court of Appeals, and it was overturned. And then basically it went from there into the Supreme Court, and they basically licked it, stamped it, no races. This is how it is. And I thought what was really interesting about this case was that it was a very close split, 5-4 in favor of Heller. And one of the judges on there, spoke for the majority, said, listen, it doesn't really matter what the Second Amendment says. There's nothing in there that says that citizens can't own guns. And there's nothing in the language, there's nothing in the Constitution or anything like that that states regular citizens cannot own guns. And one of the judges on the opposing side said, okay, that's fair, but it specifically states that there are certain that guns are for a heavily regulated militia. And he says not every gun is appropriate for that. So basically what comes out of this discussion is certain guns are, or I guess what it comes down to today is that the discussion becomes more about what type of guns are appropriate and for gun owners and what guns are not. And so it was a really good win for the Second Amendment right people. And it had zero effect on gun violence at all. It just, it didn't really, it's kind of up and down for a little bit and then skyrocketed in the 80s. And then, so it didn't really do anything. So basically what I want to ask you, and I want to ask the viewers and anyone in the chat room, what do you guys feel is important from this case? What do you think each side needs to understand from the Heller DC case? So Mike, we'll start with you.
Oh, I go first.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why not?
So the DC v. Heller case, my understanding was and that was recent, right? That was 2000.
That was 2000, about a decade ago. He started it in 2007. It went to the Supreme Court in 2008.
Okay, so my understanding is the big win for pro-gun or pro Second Amendment advocates is that it established the fact that the Second Amendment is an individual right and not necessarily a state's right or a collective right. So it's not a the argument a lot of leftists will use is, well, yeah, you can have guns if you're part of the militia. And what's interesting is now people that use that argument will try to point to the National Guard and say, well, see, there's the militia, they're armed. The National Guard's not a militia, though.
Right.
The other thing, too, is the National Guard's only been around for, what, not even a century? So the Second Amendment's been around a lot longer. So if the Second Amendment, if the militia in the Second Amendment was to refer to the National Guard, why don't we have a National Guard suit? It's because the militia refers to individual people. The militia is anyone that can carry a gun. You, me, John, the homeless guy down the street that mutters to himself. If in times of need there's a need to arm the citizens, the idea is, well, they already, one, have arms. So there's no need to manufacture and equip them, and then two, they know how to use them. So that's kind of the big thing. What I find interesting about that case, and you kind of alluded to it, Kelly, is it's still held to the fact that there are certain arms that can and can't be. You can distinguish between arms that can be banned and arms that can't be. And I've always had a problem with that. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, one of the judges actually referred to a case in the 30s, in 1939, where a judge had ruled that, okay, you can't own a sawed-off shotgun because it's not required for a militia. That's not a militia weapon. So, and this case also said, listen, there are weapons that are okay for self-defense, and there are weapons that are like firearms that are okay for self-defense, and there are firearms that are not required. And so that, I think, is where the gray area becomes. Well,
in my understanding, and this is where we'll have, when we get Bella back as a guest, we'll have to ask her this because she knows. She was the one that kind of pointed this out to me. I think she could clarify, but I believe that goes back to English common law, which is way older. The definition of an arm, as the founders understood it, was pretty much anything that you can use either to strike at someone or to hurt them, or that you can use in your own defense. It can be armor, it can be a sword, it can be a shield, it can be anything that can be used to strike at. And the definition, I'm going to butcher it here, but the definition was anything you can use to strike at someone in your wrath or in your defense.
So that included cannons even. Because there was some, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there was basically a case where it may not have been an individual, more like a private company, like a shipping company, and they were asking, can we privately own cannons? And they're like, yeah, you can. I don't know how well that would work as far as...
well, you can have your own warship back in the 18th century. It was not uncommon for people to have to privately own their own battleships. That's one of the cool things about the Constitution is that you can the Constitution gives, I believe it's the president, to issue letters of marque, or Congress can issue letters of marque. Right, which basically says, okay, you're a buccaneer, but you're a pirate for our side. So here's the bad guys that we don't like. You can go and attack them, loot and pillage, do whatever you want. Just hands off our guys and our allies. But going back to the common law thing, so the common law understanding, English common law understanding of arms was that not only was it something you can use to attack or defend, but for whatever reason, and this is where I would debate some originalists, ironically enough, is that there's a distinction between military weapons and non-military weapons, and non-military weapons are the ones actually that should be banned. So non-military weapons were things like hidden dirks, knives, certain knives that you could conceal, certain kinds of pistols that could be like tucked in your pants or hidden. So ironically, if you do like full originalism, if the left were to try to use an originalist stance and say, well, see, English common law says certain weapons can and can't be banned, they still wouldn't like it, because the weapons that the founders believed should be banned were weapons that that had no objective or obvious military application. The weapons that you and I should have access to should have a military application. So that's where the irony is the left is saying, well, you shouldn't be giving weapons of war to people. It's like, well, no, those are the only weapons we should be giving to people are weapons of war.
Yeah, that's fair.
I was thinking also, going back a little bit, the other thing I've noticed leftists like to emphasize from the Second Amendment that supposedly is well regulated. That term does not mean what they think it means. Yes, I did that. But the thing is that they tend to think it means, oh, it's referring to the government should regulate it. Well regulated did not mean that. What well regulated meant was, again, something that is regular, that is something that is you're skilled at. So basically what they meant by a well-regulated militia was a militia skilled in the use of, with regular understanding of how to use those arms. Nothing whatsoever to do with government regulation.
If you're to say, if you're ever arguing with someone who's actually intelligent, you can try etymology and be like, look, regular army, regulated. Right. They have a common root.
Right. And the other thing is that, I find that the reason sometimes there's a bit of a split between pro-Second Amendment people as far as the limits of what arms can be used is because I think there are two separate spirits of the Second Amendment. There are two things it was trying to do. And I think the two things, one puts some limits, just logically some limits on what arms can be on, and one doesn't. Which is, one is it's for self-defense. Okay, well, that puts some limits as far as, okay, if it's overkill for self-defense, then you really shouldn't own it. But then there's the other spirit of it, which was defending against a tyrannical government. In that sense, there should be no limits on what arms you can own, because quite frankly, the government, especially today, kind of outclasses us. Now, again, as Mike has said before, I remember years ago, when you pointed out, we do have kind of a numbers advantage. If the government really decided to go tyrannical, there's a lot of us with guns, and let's just be honest, a lot of the military is not going to go along with that. So we outnumber them, even if they have better tech.
For now.
So
for now.
One of the judges on the that voted on the opposite side said that this, and what everybody agreed with on this, was that it needs to be up to the state to decide who and can own a weapon, and regulate that. So in terms of like ex-felons and mentally ill or whatever, like people that are that have the potential to cause are a danger to the public, essentially. So everyone agreed about that. Yeah, the state needs to be able to say, yes, you can have a gun, or no, you cannot. They were going to leave it up to the state, and it was like, yeah, that's fair.
And
which I found really interesting.
See, I have the issue I would take with that is I have a couple problems with that. One, the 14th Amendment pretty much limits state governments to the same restrictions as the federal government. So there used to be a clear delineation between states and the states and the federal government. During the Civil War, those lines kind of got blurred because the argument for the Civil War was state rights, right? Granted, it was the state rights to own slaves, but that's beside the point. So the 14th Amendment has, as part of it, I believe it's called the Inclusion Doctrine, which basically says all the restrictions, all the rights that people have that the federal government couldn't infringe, but maybe the state could, the states can't do it either, basically. So, for example, the First Amendment doesn't prohibit a state religion. It prohibits a national religion. But there used to be state religions up until like the late 1800s, and the states just kind of moved away from that on their own. But the First Amendment said Congress could make no law, whereas the Second Amendment just says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It doesn't specify who. Yeah, exactly, at all. So I take a little issue with that just because of the language of the Second Amendment, and then on top of that, the 14th Amendment makes it kind of clear that if the federal government can't take away my guns, then neither can the state government. The other issue I take with that is, yeah, there were gun laws in the past that were passed by states barring gun restrictions. They were all designed to disarm blacks.
Right.
So it was all southern states, and it was all intended to make blacks, who were either slaves or former slaves, defenseless. So I don't know how I feel about arguing that, well, the states can do it, given its history.
Which there's some irony to, considering the fact that a lot of leftists today also like to claim that, well, what's the big deal? Even if no one can own guns, I mean, so what, really? I mean, it's not like you really need that gun. But yet they act as though how unbelievably racist it is for people to disarm black people. Why is it racist? If it doesn't affect anything today, why did it affect anything then? The thing is that, it's kind of wanting to have it both ways. Is to say, look how racist the government is. Also, it'd be perfectly fine if you did the same thing today.
Also, somebody pointed this out, and I'm trying to remember where I saw it. I don't know if it was some conservative radio host. I don't know if it was Glenn Beck or Stephen Crowder, but somebody was pointing out how the same thing, that, okay, you're saying all men are inherently violent rapists, but all women don't need guns?
Right.
You want to explain that one to me?
Right. And also, I realize I may be jumping back a little bit, but, going back to Heller also was the thing we were originally talking about, which was that recently, this was maybe a week or two ago, Maryland basically tried to make an end run around Heller by basically, because Maryland does have a 2014 Firearm Safety Act, I believe it is.
Just for the record, New England sucks, for those of you that don't know.
Well, this is Maryland. I don't think it's New England, but
it is. Yeah.
Is it?
Yep.
Oh, how far south? Because it's a little below the Mason-Dixon line. But anyway, the thing is they basically tried to make an end run around Heller, which apparently the dissenting judges basically caught that, where it was said that
Is your house under attack there, Mike?
That's why I keep my guns, man. You never know. It's the black helicopters are circling around my house.
And basically the idea was, we should be able, and this goes back to what you were saying earlier, the state should be able to control which guns people can own. And this, of course, gets into because what it is they have is an assault weapons ban, which gets us into what does assault weapon mean? And this is where we get into that issue of the definition of assault weapon, from what I can see, because again, like we talked about, is we went and checked Wikipedia. The definition can apply to almost literally any modern firearm at all. Right. So anything with the detachable magazine that's semi-automatic, well, that's pretty much every handgun that's not a revolver.
And to some creative leftists, it applies to Pop-Tarts and fingers too.
Yep, exactly.
Yes.
So and this is what you
I haven't heard the Pop-Tart thing, but let's go back to that later.
Oh yeah, I'll have to look that up then, because that was a very interesting case. But I think it goes into something more philosophical. But getting on, just saying that I don't think that the term assault weapon, I think, capitalizes on a lot of ignorance about how guns work and what they can do. Because you notice when you see media coverage, they say he had a semi-automatic rifle and we shouldn't let people own machine guns. And it's like, wait a second, machine gun and semi-automatic, two completely separate things. But yet they talk to people as though the two are the same. They conflate them. And
well, what's funny is the original parlance for weapons was just automatic. So there was no semi-automatic. So when you talk about weapons, there's different ways to load a firearm. You could have the old, shove a pellet down the barrel, and I think that's called barrel loading.
Muzzle loading.
Sure, sounds good. Fine, we'll go with it. Yep.
I think it's a muzzle. I think we call it muzzle loading. I'm not that much of an expert on firearms, but I know this. So the other option is you can do a bolt load, right? So you pull back the bolt, the spring in the magazine pushes the bullet into the chamber. You release the bolt, and that chambers your firearm and puts it behind the firing pin. Okay. Then you have what's called an automatic. An automatic basically uses either gas or it uses the sliding action of the slide. So it's Newton's third law. Okay. The bullet goes out. There's an equal and opposite reaction back. That equal and opposite reaction back pushes the slide back. That kinetic energy is used to basically chamber the round. Okay. And with rifles, it's a little different because there isn't a mechanical slide like there's on handguns, but it's the same concept. The gas that is expelled by the little explosion, because that's what a bullet is a little explosion, is redirected, and that creates the energy needed to push parts apart long enough for a bullet to get pushed up, and then it closes back in. Right. So we then later made the distinction. So an automatic is anything that's not muzzle loaded or bolt loaded. Right. Okay. Well, then we later had to make the distinction between an automatic weapon that if you hold the trigger down, it goes pew pew pew, and versus if you want to versus semi-automatic where for each pew you have to pull the trigger. So pew pew pew.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And that was because I think there were no fully automatic weapons at the time. That's why the terminology changed, because then we developed weapons where, yeah, you could hold the trigger and fire off the whole magazine.
Pew, pew, pew. And it was, the thing is, the Tommy gun, that was famous during the gangster era, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was a machine gun. That was an automatic. Right. I think it was a 22 caliber machine gun. Small, yeah, really wildly popular because of World War I and World War II. I mean, people kept them in their homes. It wasn't just gangsters. I mean, the reason why it became the gun of the gangster was, one, they were very small, so they were easy to conceal in like a trench coat, which that was illegal. But also they were pretty reliable for. I mean, they had a tendency to jam, is my understanding, but they were a good gun. You just drum load, da 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 da, give me another drum, da 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 da, you're done. And they were cheap, easily manufactured, and like lots of people had them, not just criminals. But that part of history gets whitewashed. Blacks in Jim Crow America used the Tommy gun to defend themselves from the KKK. Like it was, was it the Battle of York? Was that the John? Are you familiar? There was a massacre early 20th century. I'm thinking it just came to the top of my head, so I didn't do my research to look it up. But it was basically a big race war, basically, in America. And people even had like private airplanes, and they used those to drop bombs. Like it was that big of a deal.
Oh, so was it I feel like that was like what was it called, like Black Wall Street or something like that? Supposedly a massacre that happened. Yeah, I can't remember when that was supposed to be, but yeah, because people cite it to me all the time as evidence that the government hates black people, and it will always hate black people because reasons. But it's just that and we're kind of made to forget these things, because I think, again, it's the same reason why we try to teach kids that guns are these scary things that kill people, because I think if you can bring up a whole generation of people that are afraid of guns, you'll have more. Because right now, the biggest losing issue for Democrats is gun control. Because even among Democratic electorates, you're not going to get much traction. Look at Vermont, bluest state you can find. You don't touch their guns. They will hang you out to dry if you think you're going to take their guns. And they are, again, very, very blue state, reliably so. And yet,
now, Kelly, you're from Canada.
Yeah, but they give you a hockey stick and a whistle, and
I'm not buying it on the hockey stick for some reason.
Hey, hi, welcome to Canada. Here's your hockey stick, your tennies, and your whistle, your Fox 40.
And I guess a good camera so you can take pictures of the moose running through the streets, right?
Yes, in Sudbury. We've had a lot of those recently. Yeah, we've had a lot of moose running through. What is moose players? Still moose? I guess.
Yeah.
It's not meese. Which is funny because goose is geese. Yeah, goose is geese, but not. It's not Musai either.
Anyways, so there was up in Sudbury. It's not completely unheard of in Sudbury, which is up about 8 hours north of me. Yeah, just moose running through the street, and then in Toronto a couple weeks ago, we've had a lot of crazy moose up here.
More people should be hunting these things. I mean,
that's right. I
think it's overpopulation. They need to be hunted more. Because they do that in Michigan all the time. When things overpopulate, they start expanding the hunting.
Yeah, they do that here. They had that for coyotes. We have been overrun with coyotes. So like, yes, please go shoot more coyotes.
Same thing happened here for a while.
So you guys do have firearms then, but there's restrictions.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, it was very similar to, and I actually don't know the ins and outs of the regulations. I do, but it's very similar to the Firearm Regulation Act that was passed in DC in 1976. Very similar. It has to be stored a certain way. It has to be licensed. It has to be this. It has to be that. So you can own weapons, and there are regulations on the type of weapons, on the type of firearms, that you can and cannot own. I feel that you can own, the other types of firearms that wouldn't be first considered for self-defense, but I feel there's like a collector's license. I don't really know, but I know that I do know personally some gun collectors in Canada, so they must have. There must be a way to get them. It's just you can't walk around the street with your whatever. You can't just walk. We don't have anything like an open carry or concealed carry. We don't have any of that. You can't even walk around with like a knife or anything. Like there's nothing that you can. Yeah.
Literally right across the bridge from you, we got Michigan, which is I think starting to go almost to Texas right now, because we've got. Michigan has permitless open carry, so you can just open carry a weapon whenever. And then you can get a permit for concealed carry, but there's a congressman that I know personally who is actually trying to remove that. So you can do permitless concealed carry as well. And the only thing I'm waiting for after that is what Texas did, which then removed similar restrictions on bladed weapons. So you could carry spears, swords. I mean, like, I would look forward to that.
Walk around with a spear. Yeah.
I got swords. I would love to carry my sword.
You know that's basically what your rifle is.
I have a bow. Like I have a bow, and I can't walk around town with my bow. Like they'll, you can't do that.
Do that here. I don't think they even bother to put any restrictions on bows here. So.
But so what, as someone who lives in a country that's already got these kind of restrictions, what's your take on DC v. Heller then, as far as outcomes?
So, like for me, it's like not having guns works pretty well. Like my door's unlocked. I don't worry. I don't have a fear of somebody breaking into my house or anything like that. That being said. Yeah, that being okay, go for it. That being said, I think they've taken it too far in that, like, for instance, I'm defenseless as a,
Be right back.
I'm also naked.
Be right back.
I was gonna say I'm up for this now.
I'm on my way.
Here's my address. I posted my address below.
And something like that, our viewership just shot right up.
So like that's my problem, is that we do go a few steps too far in terms of defense, and that's one thing I do like is about the United States. You have the right to defend yourself, and so do I. But for instance, I can't carry mace. I can't carry. I can't, like, I can carry a certain version of pepper spray, but I can't carry a knife. I can, but if I were to use it on somebody, even in self-defense, I could be charged. The charges would get dropped, but they would still go through the motions of, and that we do have, but I mean, just take a look at our crime rates. I actually found a graph that shows country by country guns per capita, gun violence per capita, and it's not unsurprising. The countries that have few weapons or harder like more strict gun control have less violence. And I mean,
do they have less violence or do they have less gun violence?
Gun violence. Well, we have
Right.
less violence, I would say, here too. Like, just because we're just nice, right?
I'd say that's Canada. You can't. No, Canada. You have to throw out. Okay, it is an anomaly.
The best one was
Okay.
Japan. Japan has the strictest gun laws according to these stats that I found, and they also have the smallest gun violence. No, I feel
They
like
also have
they
a massively high suicide rate, though.
but
Well,
not by guns.
no, and
So-
so,
No,
I'm,
but still.
I'm gonna pitch a theory. So I have a theory, and it's not going to be a popular one because everyone's going to be like, "That's racist." These are countries that are culturally very homogenous, right? Japan is almost entirely Japanese. Canadian is almost entirely white. The UK is almost entirely white.
Not true anymore in Canada. Not true anymore. It's still.
Well, what's the percentage? Because I guarantee you, America is still the most diverse country in the world.
Fair, but we're also not as monochromatic as we once were.
But even if you take out, I'm not even talking about skin color. I'm just talking about culture.
Yep.
Right.
Same. No.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially, it's kind of bizarre because even as I was as I've grown up, I've seen a huge change. Like it used to be like that, the one black guy in class, and that one, whatever. It's not anymore. Even in Wingham, we've got people from
2 black guys.
I know, and it's like, oh my god, like
I'd take that.
When we were in South America, when I was in South America, we used to joke around because South America is very racist, and Chile's no exception to this. And Chile is actually where a lot of Germans from World War II, a lot of Nazis escaped. The Nuremberg trials, they went to Argentina and they went to Chile. So there's a lot of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Chileans, especially in the South. And you can see a lot of German architecture. And we should joke around and say, how do you stop traffic in Chile? And be like, how? You just like walk a black man down the street. So people freak out. They're like, oh my God!
Well, see, Canada is really pro-immigration right now. Thank you, Trudeau.
Especially if they're from ISIS.
That's right. We love you guys. You're a terrorist? Would you like $10,000? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
We need to reintegrate you guys. And it's just like, you don't have guns. Can you at least, before you bring back ISIS, can you at least bring back guns? Can you at least say, you know what?
Right.
Yes, ISIS is more than welcome to come back to Canada. But first, all right, everybody, give me back your hockey stick. Okay, here's an AR-15. Have fun.
That's right. Here you go. I feel that would change the game of hockey a lot.
Oh, God. Yes. Yeah, that would be pretty major. I was going to say, those fights would get pretty lethal.
They would, I feel, if we just took everybody's hockey stick away.
They run around with blades on their feet. If they wanted to get lethal, they just, start kicking people.
Yeah, see, it's even in hockey, they've taken the fighting away. See, that's why I feel like we've gone too far. We've taken the fighting away.
Away from kids. It's so stupid. But
which is ironic, given all that, it's still remarkable that Canadian snipers have broken, sniping records. Okay, how did you guys do that? You don't have guns.
Well, we
do. Just a few people that do, but
yeah,
have to make pretty long shots. But my thinking was also this: consider this, and I know Mike, you said this before. Is I think part of the whole idea behind gun control is an idea that, and this has been the nut of progressivism since always, is the idea that everyone is basically irresponsible. They can't be trusted with freedoms of certain kinds because they wouldn't know what to do with them. And so as a result, they see gun control as a charitable act of trying to deprive you of a right. You don't need it anyway. I mean, honestly, what would you do anyway?
Right.
You know how you hear leftists who constantly say, you're more likely to shoot yourself, as though someone with a gun is just I don't get it. It just points everywhere and shoots random things because it moved. And so it's like, dude, you realize that people that are serious about owning guns actually go and get trained. Like I went and took
Yeah.
a concealed carry class. They gave me books, they gave me materials, they showed me how to keep that training going, you know. And because people who own guns, I find, are actually very responsible. They're very serious about knowing what they're doing. And I think
Yeah.
that this contrasts with the view that people try to paint. There was an article, I want to say in the New York Times, because of course it would be, where they talked about how, you know, this guy gave like a scenario where he's in a store and somebody disagrees about a price and they all start flashing weapons and everybody's flashing a gun and, you know, like, oh, they're going to shoot each other on the highway, which is funny because LA is known for that, and yet they have plenty of gun control.
Chicago's
But the thing
known
is
for
that, you know, so it's one of those things where I'm like, I think that's part of what it's based in. It's this idea that, these people are irresponsible, just going around shooting random things. And I'm sorry, but it's just not true. And the thing is
That's because we learn, I feel, from like, it's like you said, you were mentioning something the other day about the two rifles, right? Where one was wood and one was black. And I think that's yeah. So what was that? Can you remind me?
So that was something from Steven Crowder. He has a thing called well, no, that was before he did Real Conversations, but basically where he basically tried to see how much people actually understood about the things they were banning. And as you found, typically they don't know anything because they'll say, here's the same gun side by side, but one was got a wood stock, wood finish, maybe like a half capacity magazine versus the black one that we typically know. And they simply assume the black one's a machine gun and sprays bullets everywhere, and the wood one, oh, it's just a hunting rifle. That's a little less of a problem. Mechanically, these are the same weapon. They just look different on the outside. But you can't get people to know, to most people, if you don't tell them that, they simply make the assumption because the media teaches them to assume
That's right.
carry a machine gun. And it's like, no, people can't. Civilians technically can own machine guns, but you have to have a Class 3 license, which is very hard to get. And plus, they're ridiculously expensive. I think the last number I heard was like a fully automatic rifle is going to be no less than like 5,000, I think.
No, that's too cheap. That's usually it's 10 grand. It starts at 10 grand, and I've seen them go up to like 50.
Okay, so yeah, they're really expensive. So for the most
and
part,
the longer that band goes, the more expensive they get because the way the band works is you can't use the lower. So an automatic rifle or a semi-automatic rifle, it consists of two parts: a lower receiver and an upper receiver. If the lower receiver, or maybe it's not even the lower, it might be just the. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the lower receiver. If that part of the rifle was manufactured no, I'm sorry, it's the trigger.
Right.
I don't remember. I have to relook up the law, but it's basically it's a certain part of the gun that makes it automatic, right? Or that can receive the part that makes it automatic. That's where I'm getting confused on. But if that part was manufactured prior to 1986, it is grandfathered. So it's not banned. So you can transfer it, but it's supply and demand. There's only a few thousand of those. So anything manufactured after that is illegal. It cannot be owned by the citizenry. It can only be owned by police or by people with what's called an FFL license, which is basically an arms dealer license. You can't. So that's where you get your friends whose dads all get their FFLs and they sell each other one gun so they don't lose their license.
Here's the thing: is that ultimately, and I know, like I said, I know the whole philosophy of it all is just that, again, one of the articles that I came across for today, again, was about what really is the gun control debate about. What are we trying to accomplish with it? And I think that the problem is that I think that the gun control argument is largely about the control part, less the gun. It has to do, like, I'm a firm believer that most people who argue for gun control in the more prominent circles, really, I don't believe public safety is really high on their list of priorities. The thing is that I'm not saying that's true of everybody, but I think the ones who I think it is their goal is public safety, the problem with them is that they don't know anything about what they're banning anyway. But the people I think at the top of the scheme, I don't think they really care too much about public safety so much as they care about a certain degree of control. What they're looking to do, and this is to me why you get zero tolerance stuff in schools, where a kid can't even make a finger gun without being suspended or expelled because that what they're trying to do is put in kids, because right now, like I said, big losing issue for Democrats is gun control. Even Democratic electors won't do it. But if you raise a whole new generation of people who are deathly afraid of guns, they'll do what the previous generation would do, which is voluntarily vote them out. And
which is if you look at the countries that have banned guns, that had guns prior to that, that's how they did it. Like the UK and Australia, when they banned guns, they didn't have like SWAT teams going door to door going, "Give us your guns." They just said, "Hey, we don't like guns, and we're going to ban them. So you can be the part of the majority that's already afraid of guns and is willing to give them up, or you can be the armed minority that's going to get curb stomped by the government. Which do you want to be?" So most people were stuck between a rock and a hard place. But to that point, and touching on some of the points you guys have brought up. I think a good compromise then, if you want to try to reconcile the two sides of the debate, then there's no way to compromise between the two by settling on certain restrictions on guns, because one, it's never going to be enough for the people that want to control guns, and two, it's always going to be seen as an infringement by the people that want to keep their guns. So here's the compromise. Here's how I would compromise. Make me king for a day and put me in charge, and we'll see how this works out.
God help us. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Give it a week, and I'm assassinated. I guarantee you. If it even goes that long. But this is actually something that's touched on in the Federalist Papers. It's something that the founders believe in. And interestingly enough, in the early 18th century, when it wasn't done, certain kind of political philosophers kind of complained that, and sort of prophesied in a way that, hey, if we don't do this, people are not going to respect the Second Amendment. People are not going to understand the Second Amendment, and we're going to lose that right. And I think it's a good idea is to make firearm, if not ownership, then at least training and regimentation mandatory. So if you live in the United States, and it should be done through the states. It shouldn't be done at the federal level, but through the states, you required, I don't know, once a month, you got to go to boot camp, and you got to learn how to shoot a gun, and actually go to a firing range, and you got to learn how to shoot a gun and clean it and maintain it. And then it's up to you if you want to own it or not. Some cities in America, at least one that I know of, require you to have a firearm. It's one firearm per household. There's some issues with what happens if you can't afford a firearm. I'm perfectly okay with using tax dollars to buy weapons. And yes, that does mean I'm okay with the government buying your guns and not your health care. Although I will point out that I'm actually okay with healthcare at the state level. If the states want to do it, let them do what they want to do. Right. Yeah. But that's another topic for another day. Right. But I think if you required people to learn how to shoot and spend time in it, because every friend I've ever taken who was terrified of guns. This was true of my wife. This was true of a buddy of mine from work. There's actually a couple friends of mine from work. Friends in college that grew up in liberal blue states that were just terrified of guns because they had no exposure to guns. And I didn't grow up with guns. Like my first shooting was in college. That's when I went to the firing range with a friend of mine who inherited some guns from his granddad when he died. And I was hooked. It was fun. I watched Coley and Noir religiously. Like I enjoy firearms. Okay. Yeah. I've got an AR-15. I'm sorry. I had a boating accident, and all my guns fell in a lake, and I don't have any guns, government, if you're watching this. But if you were to force people, if you watch people at the shooting range for the first time, they are terrified at first. There's all these noises going around, and they don't know what to do, and they're deathly afraid of shooting themselves. And it's like, guys, relax. Here's the basic gun safety rules. Just follow these rules, and no one gets hurt. And the first shot terrifies them. They almost jump out of their skin, and you almost do too, because half the time they limp wrist it, and you don't know where the bullet's going. The second time, they love it. They're hooked. I've never taken someone to a firing range that didn't love it and say, I can totally get why you guys like doing this. And that's why that article, that one leftist, did you read that, John? What the guy that got PTSD after he went to the firing range?
Yeah,
I'm like, how big? Okay, first of all, I think he's lying. He's either lying, or he's the world's biggest pussy. Yeah. Okay.
He got post-traumatic stress and like for using the wrong bathroom, like two probably. So.
I was gonna say, it's like the guy needs to take the tampon out. And,
you know what he is? No, he's exactly what the left is trying to create. One of those kids that grew up to be this absolutely terrified of guns. That's what they're trying to create. It's men
I honestly think he's lying. It's not that scary. It is not that scary. I think he's lying. I think he's lying about the PTSD. I think what he's doing is he's trying to create. I think he's trying to create what you're saying. I think he's saying, "Oh, it's so scary. You won't like it if you go." Because lots of conservatives. I've heard tons of stories like mine. Take your liberal friend to the firing range, and the liberal friend all of a sudden is like, "I love guns." Right? So this guy is trying to get liberals to say, "No, you don't want to go to the firing range. You'll get PTSD like I did." And it's like, okay, you get PTSD at the firing range. You need to wear a helmet to dinner. Okay, you're a fucking.
And not only that, but here's the thing. The other thing is that as a general rule, and yes, I'm leaving Canada out of this one. Gun control does not help with crime. It doesn't. The thing is look at us. Yeah. I looked over Australia's stats in 2007, which was like, about 10 years after their ban. Their gun violence rates were down. Their crime rates were not. The crime rates, again, and odd crimes that you wouldn't expect to go up, went up like massively. Assault, kidnapping, for some reason, multiplied by like 7 times.
Interesting.
But assault, rape, kidnapping, breaking and entering, all these crimes increased or stayed flat. And so again, if pulling all the guns out helps, then why are their crime rates about the same or higher than they were beforehand? Britain.
I read an article.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Kelly.
I read an article about this, very similar to this, this afternoon, and basically that was kind of their point, was it did nothing.
Right.
Because now, but I think it's sort of like the aftershock, right? For instance, you don't get people running around you don't have an influx of crime here because we're used to it, right? But it basically had that sort of tsunami effect where, oh my God, people knew now that those people didn't have guns, and so there's a lot more break and enters. There's a lot more of those types of crimes, because crimes of opportunity, I guess, because they knew those people they have no defense. But I think that's a ripple effect that would only last a generation. But that being said, I totally agree with this whole helicopter parenting thing that we're going on, and this projected fear. It's sort of like the same thing where when you see kids who are afraid of dogs because their parents are afraid of dogs, and I completely disagree with this whole mentality where we need to be afraid of guns. And I absolutely agree. I've recently had a couple of friends of mine from high school go to a shooting range for the first time, and they were posting the videos on Facebook, and it was great. And same thing, like, just not that they were afraid, but because they're politically minded like me, so they loved it. But they all three of them kind of had this sort of, you know what, actually you get a lot more respect. Like, once you use the gun, once you go shooting, you totally get it. And you have a lot more respect for how hard it is to pull a trigger, or, like the concentration, like the whole process takes a lot.
Serious you take it. And I think
exactly.
The thing is that also, this is the thing is that, and like I said, I'm not so much for the everyone must mandatorily own a gun. I want people to have the right to not own one if they want. But I think, again, you're right, is that...
Can I get their guns?
People, yeah, sure, why not?
All right. I call dibs.
Have an arsenal at that point.
I call dibs.
My thing is just that ultimately, I just find that, like, for instance, like we said, culture is a big deal. I've got friends from Europe, and they do have this odd thing, or at least it's odd to an American, where they're just like, I don't see what your problem is with government control. Because part of it is they do this on every issue, where it's like, I don't want the government controlling aspects of my life. And they're like, what's the big deal about that? So for them to live in a country where government runs big aspects of your life, to them is perfectly fine. You know, I have a friend from Norway. He argues that all the time. So what if they buy my health care? And so what if they tax me to death? You know, that's just the nature of living in the country. Whereas I say, then I don't want to live in that country. And he says, well, I don't see what your problem is. You know, it is a cultural thing. And Americans are much more wary of government because, again, our history is shrugging off a tyrannical government. Not a lot of places, or at least not a lot of places to say that in recent
our whole history.
Right.
Right.
If you look at American history, it's like Australia without the penal colony. Okay,
Right.
We're the criminals that didn't get caught. All right.
Right. Well, and look at the Constitution. The whole premise of the whole Constitution is do not trust your government with full power. The whole point of separation of powers is because you can't trust government with centralized power. We don't want it.
You can't trust anyone.
And
Canada is a really good example of that because they basically run at they control everything. They control, you know, like my son by the age of 12 can decide what he identifies at, like that he identifies as a transformer. And if I don't go along with that, then I can be charged. Like, so our government is totally control. And they've gone way too far. They everything is controlled. And
how do average Canadians react to it though?
We hate it, but we hate it quietly because we feel like we're going to offend somebody. It's kind of hilarious. I have some very interesting conversations with people at work because everybody kind of feels like, oh, I hate that, or like whatever is the newest, whatever that there is in the news or whatever. Well, just in general, whatever nonsense.
So how they hate it so much? Why do they keep electing those people?
They don't, but I think the problem is you have to look at the people that aren't, that don't like the way things are going are the baby boomers, and they're aging, and so they're in the minority. They're coming into the minority now. They're going up against the millennials. They're going up against the immigrants, who are told, this government has provided you with a house. This government has provided you with that. So they're
do you
basically
really want to take that away from everybody?
Yes.
So they're
didn't
build
yes.
Yeah, right.
So they're kind of brainwashed into going, oh, Liberal Party is great, or this part, like whatever. But it's kind of funny when you talk to people, like I've had conversations with people at my work, and they're very much, I hate, that just, it shouldn't be like this. But that's it. But everybody's afraid to say something because.
Did we lose?
Uh-oh.
No! We lost Kelly. That's so sad. At least it ended on a nice shot.
What she was saying, though, is kind of indicative of that very old adage: any government big enough to give you what you want is also big enough to take your stuff away or take your freedom away.
To your point, I think the founders didn't have it wasn't government that was the problem. It's people. You can't give anyone unmitigated, unchecked power over you. Right. If you do, they're going to abuse it 9 times out of 10.
Maybe will.
Exactly. Yeah, the most saintly individual given enough power and enough given enough power without any accountability abuses it, because that's always the temptation, because it's easy, right? Like if you've ever been in a management situation at work, right? If you've ever been a boss, the thing about being a boss is you have really the key to leadership is getting people to follow you because they want to follow you, not because you're the boss. Otherwise, you're not very effective as a leader. But sometimes you just got to get shit done, and so you put your foot down and say, "Well, fuck you, I'm the boss. Do what I say." Right? Because that's easy. Because it's easy to throw your weight around, to throw authority around.
Right.
So
plus, unchecked power does not. You don't even have to have ill intent to misuse it. That's the thing about
exactly. Power, no, you don't have to have a bad boss who says "fuck you, I'm the boss." You can have a boss who's like, "Look, I really need to get this done. I know you know how to do this, but I know you want to do it your way, but I don't have time to argue with you. So
I'm just going to
do
force
it.
you to do it.
Just trust me and do it. Right.
But and also, if you don't agree with me, then I don't want to do this, but I'm going to push you out of the way, or I'm going to violate you in some way.
I'm going to fire you. Right. That's basically what tyranny is. It's like I don't like the way I cannot be inconvenienced and try to persuade you to see things my way. So I'm going to force you to see things my way. And if I can't force you, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm going to kick you out. And if I can't kick you out, I'll kill you. That's what government does. Government kicks you out of society, puts you in jail, or it kills you. So you've given this entity a lot of power. You want to check that power. You want to make sure that that power is restrained. And you can't. The way to do that is not to trust the people you give power to restrain themselves.
Right.
Because those things. Yeah, those things are in conflict. I would love to see. I think it would be hilarious just to kind of teach liberals a lesson. If somebody just did like a duffel bag filled with like tasers and mace and just walked around a public location and then just like, we've got a report of an active shooter. What does he have? A bunch of tasers. He's like, no man, I got a tase, bro.
First ever mass tasing in human history. Yeah.
I would love to see that news reel. Just like today at Berkeley, an angry conservative filled a duffel bag with tasers. It's like we need to ban tasers. We need to ban tasers.
Like nobody hurt, nobody got hurt, nobody died, but like it was like everyone's just
was it an assault taser? Was it?
Right, we had to ban the tasers, that actually can shock people.
Did it have a 30 mag round clip, and was it shooting a bunch of wires everywhere?
Oh God, you just reminded me of that one clip. Remember the ghost gun guy? Remember him?
Yes. That's what I was going with that.
That will never get old for me. The 30 magazine clip. This can dispense with 30 bullets in half a second. Really? This is a ghost gun.
I never heard of a.
That's like 30 bullets in a half second. It's like, are you serious?
It's like I can't. I mean, I've got a lot of practice, but I can't move my finger that fast. I mean, and Kelly just gave it the perfect time.
That was a great line to walk in on. Like no one is fingering anybody right now.
Goodness.
Okay, what I missed? I'm sorry.
We're talking about how funny it would be if we just tased this shit out of everyone.
Just mass tase.
Literally, because sometimes you do loosen your bowels when you get electrocuted.
Yeah,
so.
It's nobody died, but a lot of people shat themselves.
But the funny thing is if this happened at Berkeley, nobody would know the difference. So, like, an Occupy Wall Street gathering, nobody would notice.
Oh yeah, no. Well, there'd be a lot less raping. They'd be unconscious. A lot less rape. So actually, that works in their favor. Yeah, it would smell like feces, but what else is new? But yeah, no rape.
That was. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
So I would argue we would be actually doing a favor to women's rights people if we tased everyone at an Occupy Wall Street gathering. I think that works. Feminists should be grateful for that.
All right, so we're about out of time here. Kelly, any final thoughts, or you know what we're doing next week?
Do I know what we're doing next week?
Another shit show.
In this case, it was somewhat literal. We were talking about shit there,
so it was relevant. It was a relevant joke.
Yeah.
Who do we have on next week? Kurt.
Next week's going to be Kurt Schlichter. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And we're going to talk about free speech,
which would be good because that will actually be a topic that he and I.
That's assuming, of course, Clockboy hasn't had his revenge on Kurt. So.
Oh right, yeah.
We're gonna hope and pray.
I doubt it. He's pretty inept at it. He already failed getting his revenge on Ben Shapiro. I'm pretty sure. It's
well, thanks to Kurt Schlichter.
Fill me in on that one.
We'll fill you in on the way home. Anyway,
exactly.
So when are we gonna? Now that being said, folks, if you are ever in, you said they have a firing range up in Canada, right, Kelly?
They do, lots of them, but yeah. There's one a couple of hours from there.
Well, okay, so maybe don't go with Kelly because she might accidentally shoot you.
I might accidentally shoot myself. I don't know.
Okay, well, yeah, we don't want that. But if you're ever in Michigan or Colorado and you guys want to go shooting, just leave a comment in the below here in the video today. Make sure you share it on Twitter and Facebook. Message us on Facebook. We'll be like, yeah, bro, let's go shooting. And
well,
that
you
is
can go
all
shooting with me too. That's fine. Like somebody.
Well, no, you can come down. You can come down.
No, somebody take me shooting. If you're listening out there and you want to take me shooting, friggin' leave your name and number.
I'll take you shooting. I'll take you. I will totally take you shooting.
I'll take you.
I just won't let you like hold the guns until I make sure you know what you're doing.
Give me the wooden one that's in like what's that movie when like 21 Jump Street or something like that where they give them the wooden the other guys
yeah
I've not seen that movie.
Okay, so it's Will Ferrell and he takes away the
yeah, I have seen that
and gives him give me the wooden one.
Oh, I only watched it because I actually like what's his face, the Boston guy. Mark Wahlberg. I like Mark Wahlberg. Okay. Will Ferrell's a tool.
I was gonna say, please don't say Will Ferrell, but
no, he's a tool. I can't stand him. But I'll watch him for Mark Wahlberg because Mark Wahlberg's a stud. I might go gay for Mark Wahlberg.
Okay.
I wouldn't really. Now, The Rock, absolutely. We're out of time, folks. So thanks for sharing thanks for watching the show. Please make sure to share it, and we'll see you next week. You guys have a good night.